Take three. So, all right, everybody, welcome back to the Key Nutrients and Detoxification Part 2, Take 2, with Al Sanchez, your host, and Dr. Mandy Boyle on the other line. We've just had a great 15 minutes of conversation between ourselves, and then we realized that we were on the wrong link. So, our sincere apologies for those of you that may have logged in or tried to log in. We will definitely send you a copy of this so you'll get to go through it, and you won't have missed a thing except for some good humor. We were just talking on some neat things that Dr. Boyle had done for her. Now, was it your vacation you kind of pulled that
No, that was
cranial?
a conference.
Oh, it was a conference. Okay. But it was in
Yeah.
Arizona? Okay.
Yes,
And it was just a conference just on that?
just on craniofacial release, but it was actually really focused on, it was an advanced seminar, so it was focused more on functional neurology. And there
Okay.
was amazing, there's 10 doctors or so that were the guest speakers that were just brilliant.
Okay. Oh, man, now I'm kind of bummed I missed it. How many times a year do they do that?
That was the first one they'd done in 2 years.
Okay.
So
All right.
they are
Well,
going to try and do it more often.
all right.
There's
Well,
going to be some spin-off conferences from that. Like the guest speakers who were there also do conferences elsewhere.
okay. Well, excellent. Well, then where this leads to, everybody, is what Dr. Boyle and I were talking about, is of how intricate and how linked our bodies are. I wish we could just say that there's one thing that we're deficient in, and sometimes there is, but rarely is that the case, because right along with generally when we're deficient in one thing, because our foods have such a complexity of nutrients and enzymes and cofactors and things, that 9 times out of 10 we're usually depleted in something else. So if we do find ourselves that we're depleted, then it's why we want to find someone like Dr. Boyle who understands this, so that it can raise those nutrients and those cofactors back up, see what that does for our health, and then really get into the weeds of what we really might be needing. Because chances are, if we were depleted, it wasn't all of a sudden. It's something that's happened because of changes in our lives, personal, professional, aging. These things change, and then when they change, we change. So we're really learning, and I think in the 21st century we're understanding that it's such a deeper level. But the one thing that I got out of our conversation earlier, Dr. Boyle, is relax. The whole point of that conference, of how specific it tied in all the nerves, the vagus nerve, what you were describing on how the interlinking between the different nerves, how it touches on our thyroid, our pituitary gland, our stress hormones, our sex hormones, our growth hormones, our sleep cycle. It's awesome, but sometimes it's overwhelming, right? And so I said, relax. And you're like, yes. So why do we need to relax? Why do we need to relax, Dr. Boyle?
So that we're in a parasympathetic nervous system state, which is our rest and digest. We can break down our foods, we can assimilate them, we can get the nutrients out of them. And we need all of those nutrients to support, and the building blocks for our tissues, to completely remodel our bodies, because we are not in stasis. We are completely remodeling tissues all of the time, like our skeleton every 2 years, our gut lining every 7 months or so. So.
And see, that's a great point. See, something simple like that I know, but in hearing you say it, and you hear about SBIO and leaky gut and all these things, and you forget it's something as simple that your gut replaces itself every 7 months. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you had a stressful year, something happened, you had a death in the family, you had a stressful situation, a change in jobs, a change in life. We all go through it. I mean, I can think about it in my own life in the past decade, more so than any time before. What did that do to my gut? No wonder I lost a bunch of weight, and I did this, I was checking this. I don't know what the hell is wrong with me, duh. If that's what I was going through at the time my gut was being replaced, and I wasn't eating right, I was missing meals, I wasn't sleeping, no wonder I felt like crap. It's not rocket science from that perspective, but you need physicians like Dr. Boyle that understand that. They help bring you back into homeostasis and understanding, and let you know that grandma was right. Sometimes her handing you a cookie and giving you a hug made you feel better. Right?
Emotionally, just make it a healthy,
exactly.
whole food.
Of course. Well, hopefully grandma's back in the day, it was all pretty much natural and 5 and 6 ingredients. So, but the point being of how powerful that really is. And I think about that in my own life. The key times and the key people that helped me in my life they were simply there for me. They took care of you. They loved you. They accepted you for who you were, and they helped you through something by just simply being there to
Mhm.
realize that you're not going through this alone, regardless of what it might be, some disease or some difficulty in life. And that transitions over to, why B2 and water soluble vitamins. I chose this one. I don't know exactly why I'm always drawn to the B vitamins. So I put that one up that we can kind of blow through it. I mean, people know that B vitamins are the energy vitamins, but give us your quick rundown on B2 and
Yeah,
why
if
you
you
love it.
want to go one slide prior to B1, might as well
Ah,
start at the beginning.
that's my favorite actually. Thiamine, are you kidding me? Come on. All the NBA has
Thiamin's
thiamine in
fantastic.
it.
Yeah. So I'll kind of mention all of them, and we could possibly skip some slides, but we have to just think about vitamins as all having, like, say B1 is a set of screws, and B2 is going to be the nails, and B3 is going to be duct tape, who knows, but they each are a little bit different and used in a different way. So thiamine, there's a lot of diseases that are really kind of famous associated with it. One is like beriberi. You can actually have atrophy of your brain. You can have expansion of your heart. So it gets too slack. The muscles start to thin. This one is associated, like you said, with energy, but it's actually, energy is almost like the symptom of all these underlying things that are going wrong. I mean, if your muscle fibers are not contracting in your heart and it's it's dilating so much that it's just a weak heart, you're going to be prone to strokes or aneurysms or some other kind of a hemorrhagic bleed. Or maybe you're going to be an aneurysm of the aorta or the descending aorta, like an abdominal AAA aneurysm. So the thing that I think about most with B1 is it is also going to be associated with liver function. So any kind of toxin, whether it's excess chemicals from your environment, heavy metals, plastics, alcohol, excess alcohol, any alcohol really, medications, polypharmacy, anything over like 3 to 5 prescriptions, your polypharmacy, your body is bogging down your liver and doing damage. Someone who takes Tylenol every day, they're doing liver damage. It's actually more toxic than people realize. And there's like something like 1 in every 300,000 people who take Tylenol die. I don't quote me on the statistics. It's actually a lot more common than people realize, and they might not even be aware, like family members might not be aware of the cause of death. Who knows, unless they're doing an autopsy. But the thing is that our B vitamins get very depleted when we are detoxing a lot. So anytime you're doing a major detox, you need to have it on hand. It's also associated, off the top of my head, so carbohydrate metabolism to break down and assimilate carbs and sugars, you need vitamin B1, 2, and 3, plus some minerals. For fat metabolism, you're going to need 2, 3, and 5. And for protein metabolism, you're going to need 2, 3, and 6. That's just kind of in a nutshell. But those are really important. Like you mentioned earlier, you sometimes do need a single vitamin, but it's really rare. Like if you have one depletion, like, so for example, you are not eating a lot of carbs and then you start to eat carbs, your body might not have the ability to store and utilize B1 as much. And now you need more B1 because you're introducing carbs again. Or same could be said for fat metabolism with 2, 3, and 5. So you just kind of think grossly. And it goes down to, like you said, stress, because you need to be in a parasympathetic state to be able to break down your foods, release all of your enzymes. Then you have to have all of your nutrients there for the enzymes to use as tools. And then you need to get those ingredients, once all your foods are broken down into the raw ingredients for you to rebuild your body, because we are what we eat. Then you need to get those into the cells, because the cells are also doing a lot of work in there. They're little cities.
Well, and it's interesting. I like that you broke it down from that perspective, that we take foods that have been put together by plants and animals, and then our body breaks them back down into their individual components to rebuild them back up into our body
Yes.
of what it needs and our tissues and things. It's a simple analogy. It's powerful, and the energy that it takes in both aspects. takes energy to break it down, takes energy to reassimilate it, and this is where we talk from the metabolic perspective, because as our food is being broken down, it's also being utilized. Right? It's not, doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in active transport. Things are being possibly pulled off and taken and I won't say stolen, but it's being utilized where it's needed at. So what happens if you don't, there you go. And if you don't get enough nutrients by the time that got there and it was, then sadly the cells possibly on the, at the last end of the train, they don't get anything. And if they keep running a deficit over time and over time, then we'll run into a problem, huh?
Yes. And then the other thing is that each of these cells, they are like a city. Like there is the central government in the nucleus. You have the mitochondria are the power supply, like power plants. And then you have ribosome packaging, Amazon factories and line factories, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, I guess. Ribosomes are going to be more manufacturing versus packaging. Anyhow, and then we have lysosomes, which are the waste and trash collectors and help us get rid of junk. So even when we're doing all of these metabolic processes, we're also producing metabolic waste. So everything eats and poops, for lack of a better term, even at the cellular level, parasites, microbes in our gut, us, like everything, there's waste. Right.
Well, and this is another reason why each little city needs that support. And so our job is simply to give it to it each and every day. And again, there's thiamine playing its role. And then so we got now B2. We got a little riboflavin.
So B2 is one of my favorites. I don't know why, but I think because you can actually have as much B2 as you want. And a lot of people are deficient in B2. B2 is really important for both carb metabolism and fat metabolism and protein metabolism, right? So B1 was specific to carbs. And I think that it's such a cheap supplement, but when people add it, it can be kind of like the limiting reaction vitamin, I think, for a lot of people. And it's the one that when you urinate and your urine's super fluorescent, that's riboflavin in your vitamins. I just feel like there's no toxic level of this one at all. Some of the other ones have more of that, but B2 is really sky's the limit. And your body's just going to get rid of it, like if it's excess. So.
Well, most of the B vitamins are all water soluble. So are there other levels of certain things that you don't want to see high, like thiamine excess versus B2 versus B12?
B6.
I mean, those are B6, pyridoxine.
Yeah. B6 can actually cause a lot of side effects, actually. So if you're too low or if you're too high, symptoms are the same, but neuropathy is the primary one. It does nerve damage.
Wow, interesting. Okay, then. Let's see. You got B3. So talk a little niacin. People think of niacin, and it makes me think of NAD.
So kind of like, so B2 and B3 or flavin and niacin, they actually are the two that are used for all food groups. And so niacinamide, all of the forms of niacin, NAD plus, FVM, like all the fancy names of this form that have become really popular. I don't know, actually that would be the flavin, but anyhow, this is the one that everyone's doing in injections and IVs and stuff like that, because it's such a rate limiting step. And that is because it is one of the electron carriers like FAD and NAD. They receive and donate electrons. And that's where that current flow of electrons is what's generating ATP and energy.
Right. No, it starts there at complex 1 with NAD dehydrogenase, right? And if that can go then to add a hydrogen atom, and then that proton can get donated to the gradient, then guess what? The first step in energy creation has accomplished. Now, it's great to hear it from the perspective of, we talk about mitochondria, we talk about metabolism, why it's important, and like you said, it's an electron carrier along with others, but there's not just one. They all do it generally at some level. I remember I always get confused on when someone says something gets reduced and something gets oxidized, right? So technically when you reduce something, it's gaining an electron versus when it gets oxidized, it's getting stripped away from it. And that's what metabolism ultimately is. That's what cell activity is. You mentioned it, that it's normal in what our cells do metabolically. They have to not only bring this in, generate it, then they have this waste. And on either end of the equation, it's mitochondria that are generating ATP so that all these processes, except for osmotic processes, can work technically. Without that, the cell doesn't activate. The cell will go into a defunct cycle where it no longer uses oxygen. We call that anaerobic respiration because there's been deficiencies of it. So as I tangent, sorry about that.
Yeah, so the redox reaction vitamins are actually flavin B2, riboflavin B2, and niacin B3. Right. And then vitamin C is involved in that quite a bit.
Right. Exactly. And then we got B5, pantheotic acid. This is one you really don't hear a lot of, but it's very critical, right?
I love this one too. I think B2 and B5 are the ones that are not spoken about enough. So I think that our culture doesn't like fat, but we also, or lipids, but we actually need them. Every single membrane is a biphospholipid layer. And so when we are looking at cell health, we need to really consider fats. And so you need 2, 3, and 5 to metabolize your fats and build your fats. And when I think of fats, I don't just think of cellular membranes. I think of hormone function. I think of hormones in general, sex hormones and stress hormones. And then I also think of myelin. Oligodendrocytes are the cells that are actually made up of fat and wrap around our nerves. And we have nerves. Basically, the more fat wrapped around a nerve in the form of myelin, the faster the conduction speed of that nerve. So we have like A, B, and C fibers. Well, C fibers actually are unmyelinated completely. And those are really slow signals that go from the body to the brain. And that's going to be like dull, achy, chronic pain fibers. They're unmyelinated. Well, why are they unmyelinated? I mean, well, they are supposed to be unmyelinated, but what if they're not? What if we actually had A fibers or B fibers and we didn't have enough lipids? So the myelin layer is actually not as robust. And so someone might be experiencing slower input. Like they walk slower, they process slower, the brain is functioning slower, etc. So I like supporting the fats and the membranes.
Well, and thank you. It makes so much more sense as I was taught, just because again, from an electrical perspective, and our bodies are not just like wiring in any electrical device, your phone, your lights in your house, in your car, they're insulators. And the better that is insulated, the better that it can conduct the electricity. So you're absolutely correct. And because it doesn't leak out, what happens is those start to break down, right? And all of a sudden those electrons, that energy, that signal that's in the nervous system can now leak out, or cells can leak out, or mitochondrial membranes can leak out. Yeah, when you look at it down to even the basic organelles, like you said, it made me think of this, the city example you get. So the cell's the city. With inside there, you got DNA. Within that, you got your other organelles. You got mitochondria, and each one of those is coated and sealed away from everything else in the cytoplasm, so it can do its job uninhibited, and then work with everybody in between that.
Each of them has their own membrane, which is like really, really cool because it's repeated at not just the cellular level, but inside the cell, and then our organs, and then us, and our whole body. It's really cool. Another thing you said that triggered something for me is like, look at multiple sclerosis. It's a demyelination. So I mentioned oligodendrocytes, that's in the brain. Well, the Schwann cells are the alternative. So Schwann cells and oligodendrocytes are essentially the same type of cells. They make the myelin that wraps around our nerves. One is in the central nervous system, one is in the peripheral nervous system. So multiple sclerosis is demyelination, that fat eroding around your neurons, right? And Guillain-Barré syndrome is also demyelination, but in the peripheral nervous system, right? So we are losing this fatty layer around our nerves, and it results in pain, inability to function, spasms. It's degenerative.
Well, and when you look at that to diets, the world went away from fats. You know,
Horrible.
fats were evil. And you're like, as we've
Nope.
come now, and again, it's never always one side of the spectrum or the other. It's usually a good
Yes.
balance between it. But fats are highly necessary, and if you deplete out fats and you're not putting in healthy fats, especially if you're replacing those fats, imagine a body built upon, you know, Crisco and what's the other oil out there? You know, margarine and
Or
all
any
these
of the
other
polyunsaturated fatty acids. Yeah.
polyunsaturated fats, right? So it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you hear people discuss these things as if it's all or nothing. All or nothing thinking is never good in any situation. It's all is inclusive. It's just the timing and the relationship under the situation, and fats are hugely important, especially the healthy fats, as we now know. So awesome. And then
that also reminds me of two other things. Fats are very, very important for making bile, right? And then we make bile, and bile emulsifies fats. So if someone has had their gallbladder removed, it's really important for them to take a supplementing bile. I use Biotics Research Beta Plus. I think I might have mentioned that last a month ago. But the reason is because we need the bile to be dumped on the food to break it down to the fats, and we need to extract the fat soluble vitamins, but we also need the bile salts to bind toxins in the 28 GI tract, because if you don't bind toxins as your body's excreting them into your waste material, as the bulk of your food is going through and forming feces, the toxins will resorb back in. But if the bile salts are there, that's what gives stools the brown color, right? If the bile salts are there, then they're going to conjugate and hold onto those toxins, so you're not going to resorb them. They're critical.
Wow. Something as simple as that, knowing how important those salts are. You know, people don't understand it as much, but I sometimes cringe when someone says that they haven't had a bowel movement in 3, 4, 5 days. Right? I'm like, wow, the detox pathways
that's like never flushing the toilet, you know, like, but you still use it.
Thank you. I got a visual on that. No, but you're absolutely right, because now you've allowed that to do that in your body, where those toxins that would have normally been eliminated within a 12 to a 24-hour period now get to hang out, and they're hanging out. And what happens when bacteria, not good things come of that in those situations. So it's important to do that. And those individuals that say they've been that way their entire life, and then they go on a truly good, healthy change in the course of their life, for their diet and their exercise and their triggering of their peristaltic movement, like we just talked about, the simple things of relaxation, because what stress does and how it can literally tighten up your gut and hold on to things because of the anxiety and the chemical reactions that creates in the body. It's phenomenal to realize how simple that can be, and yet how literally cleansing and healthy it is when it goes the right way, right?
Yeah.
So no, amazing. Something as simple as that, and people don't think about it from that perspective of why these things are important and how they work together for the creation of bile, the digestion of fats, so that our body can be healthy. So awesome. Pyridoxine. Where do you like pyridoxine at?
Okay, so this is going to be for protein conjugation and breaking down proteins as well. And when we think about proteins, of course, muscle is the first thing that comes to mind, but actually we need proteins to build strong bones. We need them to hold things together. All of our enzymes are going to have some protein infrastructure component. The actin and the myosin, like we have a cytoskeleton that keeps our cells, they stay round or they stay in a spindle shape or whatever it is, because of actin infrastructure, like scaffolding. And our immune system, immunoglobulins, like they are made out of proteins. So the main two proteins in the body are actually albumin and globulin. And so I like to look at that ratio. It should be about a 2-to-1 ratio. Albumins are going to carry around a lot of things. Globulins are going to be used primarily to form immunoglobulins, which are regulating our immune system. So they are making antibodies. You can have antibody like IgE, that's going to be your typical antibody when you go to an allergist. They're going to test for that. Or you can have IgG, for example. That's going to be a rheumatologist. That's going to be someone who's going to have more like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or sclerosing angiitis, just more destructive diseases. And a complement protein is in there too. But but they're in the complement protein is the word protein. So there we are again to B6, like our whole immune system is regulated by this. And detoxification, because in our liver, we use a lot of this for detoxification. Now, this is the one that can become toxic in excessive doses. So I do have patients who come in and they're taking multiple supplements and they've been to every store every time I'm like, wow, you're taking like way up, and they have neuropathy and can cause irreversible neuropathy in theory, right? There's definitely articles out there on this. So it is you do need to be mindful. You do need it.
So what's an amount of B6 you like to see?
About 50 milligrams.
Okay.
No more than that. If someone has certain conditions, it is necessary, right? So like if you have more serious illness, you need more, but you need to make sure your detox pathways are running before you start messing and just adding more into the mix, right? So your liver needs this, but your liver has to be up and running to be able to metabolize it out as well.
And is that something for the B vitamins that individuals can just get and look at a blood test and look for it, or is it a specific assay that you need?
So that's where it gets a little tricky. So there's a lot of ways to assess vitamins. So I kind of like all of them, but some less than others. For example, if I were to go to a standard lab, a major lab draw station around here, and I were to order a vitamin test, that's going to be the amount of vitamins in their serum. So I always instruct my patients to not take any vitamins for 4 days prior to getting the labs. Otherwise, we're just measuring what's getting into their bloodstream, but we're not really getting to see what's getting into the cells, and we're not getting to see how the enzyme levels are being affected by high or low vitamin levels. So for example, B12 is a great one. They fortify so much with B12 these days. People come back and their labs, B12 is off the charts. It's high. And their other doctors say, no, don't take that supplement. Well, why is B12 high? Is it because it's not getting inside the cell where it's needed? And are you still having all the symptoms of B12? And what's your methylmalonic acid level? Because that kind of will help us understand where if you need B12 or not. Homocysteine is affected by B12, your neurotransmitters, your hormones, everywhere. You need B12 and folate. They are they're a partnership. One cannot work without the other. So if you have one good and one bad, that doesn't do any good unless both are in a good state. And you can't, I'm not aware of overdosing on these two as well. Like they are truly water soluble, but I think that there might be some conditions where they seem like they're high in the literature because you're not assimilating them and getting them in the cell.
So that raises two thoughts and comments that you mentioned. One, so stop 4 days before you get your blood drawn of any supplementation.
Vitamins and minerals. I allow people to take herbs and enzymes still, as long as herbs and enzymes don't have any vitamins or minerals added to them.
Okay. And then, so by doing so, like you mentioned, the high levels won't be just floating around in the blood. And that'll be a much more accurate level of how much B12 is in their system, because it'll have time to just balance out between what's in the cell and what's in the serum. Or how does it exactly work? So some people might think that, well, if I stop, then what if my body needed that B12 and I don't have it? Mm-hmm. Is there any concern with that or no?
There is storage of your B vitamins in your liver.
Okay.
Right. So if someone stops their vitamins and they're coming up and their B12 is at 200 or 300 on the low side, then they don't have any storage. They've used up their stores really fast, right? You have to take it with a grain of salt, and that's why doing methylmalonic acid and some of the other tests are good to assess. Like, for example, B6, alkaline phosphatase needs B6 and zinc to even make alkaline phosphatase. So if someone's alk phos is low, either, I mean, there could be other reasons, but primarily the first thing I'm going to look at where I can be proactive and help them out and see if I can get their level up is make sure they're assimilating and absorbing their zinc, and their vitamin B6 is good.
And thank you for doing that, because you went right where I was wanting to let everybody know about how our body is wonderfully made, where our liver does that for us, so that it helps us through these times. And what we're trying to do is get an accurate measurement of what's actually in us, so that we know how well it is. Because if you go off that for 4 days and then you get tested, like you just mentioned, you're not assimilating it. Okay, then we have another issue to look at, for not just putting it in the system, but also for the cells, because nothing operates in a vacuum, as we discussed earlier. There's always cofactors, there's lock and key, however you want to describe it, partnerships that are made within. This is why the gut, right? We didn't even touch on that with thiamine. Thiamine doesn't get converted without the protein in the gut, in the stomach acid, to start the process. So, and not that you have to understand this all at the biochemistry level, but it's why you want to eat a balanced diet. It's why these things are paired together normally for good nutrition. If we just ate every little ingredient by itself, far more too complicated for what our body needs on any given day. So, how would you really test for that? What's in our cells?
Okay, so Vibrant America has a test, the micronutrient test, and you can actually look at what's in the serum versus what's intracellular. So it has extracellular and intracellular. So I do like to do that one. It is a snapshot in time, but it is kind of how good is a person at getting vitamins into their cell. That's a great thing to know. So I do consider cost for my patients as well. So the other option is you just try to make sure they're breaking down everything first. But anyhow, so I digress. But that's one great test. Another one is the CNA through ALCAT. They have a nutrient assessment. And then for a functional test, now those are direct measurement tests. Then there's functional tests. And so I use a lot of the organic acid tests. And I like those because it's urine collection. So it's easy for people, and it's a functional test. So if an enzyme is not working, it takes genetics into consideration, right? If you have a gene that's maybe a little bit slower and they introduce more of a vitamin to it and it works better, well, that's a good sign that you need that vitamin, right? So that's kind of a real life scenario.
Well, no, thank you for explaining that. I hope that helps others that have that question that it gets put to me all the time of like, what's in your system and what you're actually using can be two different things. And you have to be able to understand that in the various tests that are out there, because getting a blood draw is really just a super high level. And just because you have one marker off, as you mentioned earlier with how if B12 needs its partner, and if it doesn't have it, then it's going to throw it off. Zinc is going to throw off its partner. So it goes way beyond just a high level test. Those high level tests are great in a hospital setting when they're looking at, can we send you home?
Yeah.
But how well you're truly doing from a nutritional perspective, that's a different reading. So
if you go back to slide number 5, the one where homocysteine is getting converted by the MTR gene to methionine.
Number 5.
Yeah, it's up a few more. There it is. Okay. So this is just kind of what you're saying, right? Like, so for homocysteine to be converted into methionine, you literally need zinc, B9, folate, and B12. So say you have enough of your B vitamins and you don't have that zinc available, well, then your homocysteine is going to go up. And that's an inflammatory marker and predictive of cardiovascular risk or disease. And say you have zinc and you have folate, but you don't have B12, same thing. So you don't necessarily know which one it is. And then you can look at the purple things, like now we got our lead, our mercury, and other things in the mix. And you could have things that are actually blocking the receptor sites so that enzyme can't even use those vitamins.
Wow. Yep. Great. No, thank you for, we didn't even touch on that from the last time. So thank you for bringing that back around to make sense as to why these little things that we're talking about are so key.
Can I add something to vitamin B6?
Well, of course.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the activated form pyridoxal 5-phosphate is not, from what I keep delving into this because I don't want to create neuropathy in patients. I don't want to have levels of B6 that become toxic. And so I do try to give people more of this form when possible. Like it's a little bit safer for me. I can go higher on the dosing. So if someone has a lot of B6 symptoms and deficiencies, then I want to make sure that I'm using the safer form. Another thing is like looking down at the second to the last bullet point, ammonia or amino groups building up. So like when you look at your blood urea nitrogen bun on a simple comprehensive metabolic panel, for example, say it's elevated, that could be a sign that you're lacking the B vitamin to break this down. That's a really important thing to notice. Another thing, glutamine in the gut. We use glutamine, which is an amino acid to help heal the gut lining. And so if you don't have enough B6, you may not be able to build the gut lining very well. It's a structure, right? So we think of structure and B6 together. Another one is our neurotransmitters, whether it's any of the catecholamines, dopamine, serotonin, or epinephrine, glutamate. Glutamine to glutamate is actually just a little bit of a transfer there, or alpha ketoglutamate, which is an enzyme in the Krebs cycle where we're using oxygen and doing aerobic metabolism. It's just, we need to think about like, there's not a single piece of the puzzle that can be missing for us to function. We really are miraculous. Like it's beautiful. It's cool.
No, it really is. And thank you for being able to explain it. It's a very basic level. It brings back, like you said, using your city analogy or the partnership analogy, because I think that's huge for a lot of individuals that they just start adding lots of things. And I'm sure they come to you as they come to us with this laundry list of I'm taking 25 supplements, so I should be healthy, right? You're like,
well, oh man, I think the spreadsheets they come in, but guess what? They are often missing. You can take supplements all day long.
Okay, and what are they missing? Poly-MPA?
Stress. They got to get rid of their stress. And they
right.
have to get their enzymes working to absorb all those vitamins. Otherwise, they're spending hundreds of dollars, and they're probably 500 to 1,000 if they're these people come in literally with 20 bottles of supplements, and they line them up on my desk. And if they're stressed out and they're not digesting, they're not getting the nutrients. So that's another good tip is I always have people take their multivitamin stuff or multivitamins and minerals with digestive enzymes when they're in a real crisis state.
Because they work together. How can they accept it if they don't? So
yeah, and with food, because really all of that should be with your food, right? So I try to mimic how the body should be until we get over the bridge and they're kind of coasting on their own.
Right. All right, that throws us into biotin. Some little B8.
Yep. Okay, so this is going to be a carbon, like adding carbon groups on, methylating, like literally needs B8 so it's been called B8 and B7. And if you look at the literature, I don't know which one to use. So I just put both of them in there. Okay. This is like everyone thinks this is the one for hair, skin, and nails. It's all of them.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of people take supplements and they're like, oh yeah, I'm taking a B vitamin, and they're literally only taking B12 and they're doing a lozenge from their GP or whatever. Well, Okay, so you got enough B12. Well, what about the folate to activate the B12? Or what about your 1, 2, and 3 for your energy? People think B12 injections are the end-all cure-all for energy, but it's like such a narrow view. So,
I mean, you get the initial kick in the pants, no pun intended, but then it's gone, it's depleted. So yeah, you might have triggered it for just the short term, but you're not. It's another band-aid approach to it, to certain things. If you're not processing, if you're not absorbing it, and you need that, we got to fix what's wrong downstream, not being absorbed in the gut. You're missing some enzymes, whatever that key might be. So, and that jumps us on to B9, Mr. Folate, that of course most mothers know about, right?
yes. And this is the one that most people go, oh, I have an MTHFR mutation, right? So,
Right.
so first of all, we have multiple copies of our MTHFR gene, and we can have in those copies, some of them are going to not work as good. And it is a legit thing, right? So when it's the MTHFR, the THF is the tetrahydrofolate form. Folic acid is actually what you'll see on a lot of labels, but that's a synthetic form. And for some people, depending on how their bodies are made and what enzymes they have and genes they had, what their genetics are, if you take folic acid and it's truly the synthetic form, it will actually sit in the receptor site and it will block them from their natural folate activating the cell in the way that the folate should. So it could be like a plug. It could be like junk in the receptor site. So it's like gum in a keyhole and you want to stick the key in the hole and you can't.
I never did that as a kid, by the way.
I didn't accuse you of it.
I remember those days.
I did not. I actually just made that up. I didn't know that was a thing.
Oh, did you? Oh my goodness, that was a thing back in. I'm a kid from the 70s, so yes.
Okay, well, me too.
we thought it was funny. Okay, I digress.
So
But
we
no,
really
that's
need this
a
one
great
for
point.
our DNA, and the baby on the right has spina bifida, so neural tube defects. As an embryo is forming in utero for the nervous system to develop, for everything to form correctly, you need your adequate folate and adequate B12. And remember, they cannot work one without the other.
Well, and I mean, I think that's what most people think of when they think of folate for pregnant women, and that's been ingrained because of what happened in the 20th century and the deficiency across B vitamins across the board. But this was the one that really made a name for itself and scared a lot of people because of what it would do if it was deficient. But
And do
so
you
many
know when
people
the deficiencies? When
Sorry,
they
do I know
started, when the deficiency started in our food supply.
Oh, if we take that back to in the industrialization of the world, I mean,
Highly processing grains. They started ultra processing cereals and stuff like that and having boxed foods, and they weren't aware of taking all the nutrients out of the foods in the process, and they're like, oh darn, we have all these birth defects starting. So then they're like, well, let's go spray vitamins on it. But when they do put vitamins back in cereals and stuff like that, they are putting folic acid, not the natural form.
So let's get back to that. So in the natural form of folate, where do you like to see that and or get that?
Oh gosh, so there's lots of different forms here as well. Dr. Ben Lynch up in Washington, he does Seeking Health and Strategy and all of that. He has a lot of variants of this vitamin for those people. So when I don't know and I don't want to get into fancy testing and I want to save someone money, I'm probably going to choose a form that has multiple forms in it. And a lot of vitamins, a good company will have multiple forms in it, like folinic acid versus folic acid versus folate or folinate. So.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I like Dr. Lynch. He's got some great products, and I like the sublinguals, and the lozenge ones are nice and easy to utilize. Lead us to the famous vitamin C. Thank you,
okay, I love vitamin C. Okay, so we all know about it for our immune system. We've been raised like, oh, you're getting sick, take vitamin C or have a glass of orange juice. There's a lot of debate around vitamin C and ascorbic acid versus what's the other? Citric acid, for example, right?
Right.
But bottom line is humans cannot make vitamin C. We are one of 5 species or something on the planet, and there's like some species of bats that go back and forth from being able to make it and then not, which is interesting because bats eat fruit, right? So I bet that's related to their consumption and maybe a short lifespan where that genetically can favor certain populations of bats, and maybe it's a recessive gene. We actually almost can make vitamin C. We're only missing the 3rd enzyme out of the 3, and I think that's correct. But anyhow, so vitamin C is another one that's going to be really, really important for bone formation. It's associated with scurvy. And that was from pirate ships and all of that. They discovered it. Women who care about wrinkles, if you've got a lot of fine wrinkles, or men, whoever, that was very sexist. Sorry. Anyone
I
who
didn't
has
take it personally.
Shar-Pei puppies, it's just really important to have good vitamin C, because vitamin C is going to help your collagen cross-link, zinc, vitamin C, a little bit of copper in it. Peptides are all of the craze, right? The GSK with copper actually really is a great one because it helps collagen formation. But anyhow, it is a vitamin in over, I think it's like 300 to 500 enzyme reactions. It is present everywhere. In low doses being, now this is still debated. Some people say under 20 grams is still low dose. 20 grams would be 20,000 milligrams, right? So that's high. But that would be an antioxidant. And then as we get over a certain concentration within the cell, it's actually around 300 millimoles. That actually makes it a pro-oxidant. And so it can be used different ways accordingly. Like if you want the antioxidant properties, you're going to stay in lower doses. And if you're wanting pro-oxidant properties, you're going to go to mega doses.
So, and yet on the way to mega doses, you're still, doesn't it stay that antioxidant, get to a pro-oxidant state, and as soon as it drops back down intracellular, it switches back to the antioxidant state, correct?
Yeah, so it's a redox molecule as well in that sense. Redox means reduction oxidation. It's passing the electrons both directions.
Exactly.
But it probably naturally favors an antioxidant state, right? So it's going to be reductive.
Correct. And so for the average person, what do you like to see them taking as an addition to a good, healthy diet?
Yeah. I think it's okay to pulse it. I kind of like pulsing everything because it challenges your body sometimes so that you don't get too dependent on it. We actually need a little bit of stress to help us hold on and store things. First of all, I love liposomal vitamin C's more than regular vitamin C's. You already get regular diet, and that's just because you assimilate so much more. Like if you take a vitamin C supplement, most of the time it'll go through you and only 2% will be assimilated. Whereas if you take a liposomal form, which is adding a fat onto a water soluble molecule so it goes through membranes, that can be as high as like 98% or even more assimilation. Wow. It's almost close to an IV. Yeah, it's pretty darn cool.
2% to 98% absorbability, because you'll lose that much that won't get absorbed. Wow, I didn't think it was that high, but yeah, I knew it was high.
That's vitamin C. I don't know about if I would imagine all the different nutrients would be different based on their size, how much they react with things around them, and whether they're more lipophilic or hydrophilic.
Well, and again, this is why you want to take things, as you mentioned earlier, with food. Yeah. So that it has other binding agents and absorbability ratios tend to go up because exactly, rather than an empty stomach with vitamin C and a glass of water.
Yep.
Bye.
Yeah. Oh yeah, at high doses orally as well, that causes diarrhea, right? So people can actually use it as a way to flush their colons. Like if someone actually had constipation, high dose vitamin C might be a really healthy, safe solution. Just saying, with some
Well,
magnesium.
I'd have to try that from my next colonoscopy.
There you go. Actually, there's formulas that you can Google that exist.
For vitamin C. Okay.
Yep. You don't want to take the chemicals or the yucky stuff. So.
Right. Leave it to magnesium, sodium, and vitamin C.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you were just talking about the lipid soluble vitamins. So
yep.
You can have liposomal, and there's lots more liposomals on the market now. I think they've.
Oh yeah.
I remember we would make our own, right? We would grab a blender with some fats and.
And then you put it in a jewelry cleaning container, and then use the ultrasound to create the micelle. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So
making your own vitamins is kind of fun, actually.
It's interesting how simple it is, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So you have some. Well, the B vitamins are needed for specific enzymatic reactions. Vitamin C, D, A, E, and K are more general to that. So, again, having that with your food, eating it with other fats, increases the absorbability of the other vitamins, along with, and again, good fats. So we hear that term kind of thrown around. Do you have any thoughts or comments on good fats versus other fats?
Oh man. Okay. So I would never say one group of anything is bad, because it's there, right? We are built synergistically with our environment. So I would say there's the monosaturated fats. That's going to be coconut oil is a classic example of that. We have our saturated fats, which is going to be from animal products, butter, fat on meat, etc. And then we have our polyunsaturated fats, which are our PUFAs, and they're really getting slammed right now as the bad fats, the nut and seed oils. That being said, we need all of them. Of course we do. And so that's why I love bile so much, to break down the fats and to be in that rest and digest state. So as far as what I do, I actually eat a really high fat diet. I perform better that way. I feel better. Fat metabolism, when your body is used to storing and utilizing and burning fats, which is ketosis really, but you don't want to be too much in ketosis, because that causes ketoacidosis. Like for diabetics, that's one of the risks, is they can't use their sugars, so they're using fats, but then they can get into a very acidic state burning fats. But like, for example, when you go to bed at night, it's best to actually have fats in your belly, because you're going to burn energy slowly all night long. Whereas if you have a high carb meal before bedtime, you're going to spike your blood sugar, and then it's going to cause you to wake up probably a couple hours later. Or you can actually have when people wake up in a panic attack and feel really awake, that could be their blood sugar getting too low, and that spikes their cortisol.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And then the first line on this slide, many are based on cholesterol. It's really cool. So I don't think you could see the chart behind me, but this whole area is like 4 ring molecules. And so here is basically vitamin D, almost looks like cholesterol, almost looks like progesterone, almost looks like estrogen, almost looks like testosterone, and DHEA. I mean, it's just like, there's just little finagling of this molecule to turn it into something else. And so it's really important to remember how important it is to have these fat soluble vitamins, because sometimes they themselves are the infrastructure for our sex and stress hormones.
Well, great point on that, and thank you again for pointing out your wonderful chart behind you there, for those of you that may have not seen last time. That's the metabolic cell cycle. That's the Roche one, right?
Yeah, metabolic pathways by Roche.
Yeah, so if we can make it out, at least I can. It shows you how many, oh God, I can't remember the total number, 10,000 plus reactions that are happening, and this is going on in one cell. This is just part of a bigger, larger process, and you multiply that times 30 trillion cells. Yeah, constantly in different states, right? A million times. Right. In one single cell, of what can be happening across 3,000 mitochondria. Is the cell active? Is the cell in in decline is the cell in replication mode. Oh my goodness, it goes on and on for how all these nutrients are being utilized across the board. So, but like you mentioned, I think I remember when I first learned about vitamin D, and they said it's more like a hormone than it is like a vitamin compared to the other vitamins.
That's right. It has the same backbone. And vitamin K as well actually has a very similar backbone.
Do you like your ratio between vitamin D and vitamin K?
What do I like it as? I like about, if I'm recommending it, I like about 4,000 IUs of vitamin D to about like 200 to 250 mcgs or micrograms of vitamin K2. I don't supplement with K1. I tell people to go eat their leafy greens, but because I don't really want to mess with blood thinning and all of that. And I think that has a nice balance with nature if they're eating their vegetables. But with K, I do recommend K2 often.
Okay. Well, and we have our first soluble vitamin A.
Oh, can I just mention too, and you can stay on the slide, but the fat soluble vitamins do build up in our tissues, right? So these are ones where you can overdose. Water soluble vitamins flush through really fast into the urine. There is a little bit of storage in our body, especially in the liver, but fat solubles are actually going to store in all of our tissues and the liver, and they can be toxic. So it's important to realize that.
Thank you. And so that leads us right into the first one, vitamin A, top of the list.
Okay, so this is like, eat your carrots for good eyes, right?
Yes, I remember those days.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's kind of true. Although when I food test people, it's really shocking how often people react to carrots and actually have antibodies against it. But I think that's more along the lines of maybe carrots have been genetically modified. They have pesticides on them. They cause leaky gut, or while eating carrots, they have a stress incident where they have gut impermeability or gut permeability and leaky gut, and the bigger pieces of carrot get into their body, and then they now react to them.
And what dose do you like to see of vitamin A as a supplement?
I usually follow what's recommended on the bottle for this one. I don't really macro dose on this one. I know some people do. I actually just bought my first bottle of Poly MVA Plus. I'm going to experiment it with it on myself.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not one I mess with that often, but I do love it as an antioxidant, and people need it. And people really do love it. If they're deficient in it and they add it in, they notice improvements.
And it was really an interesting one because as I learned about it with what Dr. Garnett had done to solubilize it, right? And how neat that is from the perspective of, I think in Poly it's 50 IU per ml. So what a great ad, because of what he saw. His was all about the blood, and what he saw the difference between solid tissue and what was going on in the blood. So it's interesting what his thinking was 30 years ago versus now, how it applies to immune system function, skin,
it protects from free radicals. Like your eyes are so sensitive to free radical damage, and vitamin A is a major antioxidant to protect against free radicals.
Right. Yep. No, it's beautifully made, and to use the retinol version rather than the beta carotene version, so you can use a lot less of it. So, wonderful. All right, that'll lead us into what's next on the list. We have vitamin D. All right, we kind of touched on that one, but anything more you want to?
And you kind of like, what ratio do I like with K2? Probably everyone or a lot of people know this already, but post-COVID, a lot of people were mega dosing on vitamin D. And pre-COVID, no one was thinking about practitioner-wise balancing it out with K2. And what happened is there became more calcifications of tendons, more mineral deposits in the soft tissues, like in the aorta and stuff like that. And there people were like, why is everyone having more mineral deposits in soft tissues where they shouldn't be? And the kidneys really are important in metabolizing vitamin D. So that's important to consider if you're ever dosing someone with their kidney function. But so the kidneys help vitamin D, your body hold on to vitamin D, but K2 helps direct minerals into the bones. And so the point where your muscle body, like I'm going to just use a chicken leg. It's kind of a gross description, but you have the muscle belly of the chicken leg, right? And then it goes into the tendon and into the bone. All of our muscles are like that. It's not like you have a muscle, you have a tendon, and you have a bone. It's very integrated with the connective tissue, so much that there's not really delineation of the bone into the tendon, right? But the bone is hard and the tendon isn't. And bones actually have a little bit of flexibility as well. And that's important for them for shock absorption. So K2 is needed to help direct minerals into the bone. It just is really important that I still get a little surprised that I have people coming in on 50,000 IUs from their doctors and heart disease, and they're not taking vitamin K. K2.
Wow. And what levels do you see of their vitamin D at that level? Are they well above 100 or what?
Right. Yeah. No, their vitamin D levels are good. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a threshold where it becomes, where it starts calcifying the soft tissue?
It's all about balance with the K, honestly.
Okay.
That's what I think. I mean, I'm sure there's experts out there that know better than me. This is not my area of study, but I really believe in balance everywhere. And I know that I like vitamin K2 is a little harder to test unless you do the Vibrant America test for inside the cell. But if someone is sore, I gave the chicken analogy for a reason. So if someone is sore in multiple areas of their body, and you push on it where that tendon is inserting into the bone, that is usually a pretty good sign of vitamin D and or K2 deficiency, right? Because what happens is as our muscles contract, they pull on the tendon that's inserted into the bone, and then the mineralization is now kind of starting to form into the tendon itself. And when you x-ray that, that looks like a bone spur. So you see that building up around the knee. That's the body's attempt to build bone to stabilize a joint. And it's really critical to understand that, because you do not want excess bone growth into the tendons, because you're going to lose mobility. You're going to get more stiff and rigid, right? That should be flexible tissue. Now it's becoming hard.
Well, great explanation. Thank you for that. No, very well put. And again, balance. So, vitamin E. When I see vitamin E, I think of it was the first criminalized vitamin by big pharma back in the day.
So I love this one too, because I learned a few years ago, like 2019, I guess it's getting further away, but vitamin E is really, really important, again, to protect from antioxidants. And just like the vitamin A is helping in the eyes a lot, vitamin E is the skin. And we know almond oil, people used to put it on their skin, or vitamin E oils for skin to help with stretch marks or scars so they heal and flatten. Another really cool hack with vitamin E, and I like to use mixed tocotrienols and mixed tocopherols, and take it before you go out in the sun, and you're going to have sun exposure, and it will reduce the amount you burn, and it'll make you more likely to tan. It's a healthy procedure to tan, but it's not so healthy to burn. That's a sign of oxidation and free radicals in your skin tissue. So when you think about sunscreens, they're blocking your ability to convert sunlight into vitamin D and stuff like that. I really am not a huge fan of sunscreens. And if you are going to use them, there's a time and a place where you definitely need them. But I like zinc oxide, but I like to take vitamin E. So internally, my cells are ready to go before I go out in the sun. And I've been experimenting with this one for years, and it's kind of fun. It's fun to not get sunburnt anymore.
Okay, so I was about to ask you that, because I've done the same thing. What is your dose that you like to do from? I do a whole plethora of antioxidants, but
I do about 400 IUs. So this is like one of those ones that can kind of thin your blood a little bit, right? And if you're starting to bruise, you're taking too much.
Okay.
And people who are on warfarin or some other supplements may need to be really careful, or blood thinners, Xarelto, etc.
Excellent. No, and it truly is. It's interesting to have done that. And, you know, I don't like wearing sunscreen unless I absolutely have to, but I'd rather cover up with a shirt and a hat or something than to worry about it. But you do want some sun exposure. So
it's healthy for us. It helps us. It helps our mood. It, gosh, the rays of light at different times of day give feedback. Like you wake up in the morning and you get sunlight indirectly in your eyes. That's saying, hey, wake up, produce cortisol. And the rays of the sun are actually the sun's moving towards you and the rays are moving towards you. So that's one wavelength, right? And then at the end of the day, the sun's moving away. The rays are still coming towards you, but there's a net deficit there. And so you're getting different rays of sun. And it's like, hey, calm down, relax. Let's start making some melatonin. That's good stuff.
Yeah. The basic cellular biology of life on this planet.
Yeah.
It's designed that way, you know, the things we do that can kind of convolute that and create issues for ourselves. And when we're out of balance, when that homeostasis is not balanced up, balanced down, balanced up. So that's where these things help to restore that. So.
Okay, and then vitamin K, we'll just talk a little bit. We kind of hit it already. But so when someone's going in for surgery and their doctor is like, hey, no K vitamins, it'll make you bleed out. Well, they're talking about K1. And so that's the one I really don't give people very often. I'm almost always working on K2, and I try to not buy supplements that have K1 in them because that's your dark leafy greens, right? So people already know if they're prone to clotting. You bump something, you bruise, not clotting, hemorrhaging and bleeding, right? So so it is true, do not take it before surgery. And so it also, K1 is made mostly by your gut bacteria, especially when you're eating those green vegetables. And then K2 actually is going to be more in meat as a source. So vegetarians especially probably need to make sure that they're getting adequate K2 because it's not going to be as readily available to them.
And you said you like to supplement with how much K2?
Between 125 to 250. I think I said 200 to 250 earlier, but you can even be as low as 125. Honestly, it's one of those ones that's stored. And I'm not taking this every day, mind you. I'll take it in small doses. If I had it every day, it wouldn't hurt me, but I will pulse this one with vitamin D, like maybe once a week, take a mega dose of vitamin D3 K2, like maybe 20,000 IUs of D, and then whatever the K2 ratio is in it.
So that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. So people have heard the discussions that you should have a little bit each day versus you just mentioned taking a larger dose one time a week.
Yeah. I think if you're treating something daily is good. If you're just kind of maintaining, I think pulsing is good.
Perfect. I agree. All right. The factory-like enzymes. Is that a picture from Amazon right there or what?
Something. We're over an hour right now.
Oh, we are, aren't we? Oh my
Watch
goodness.
the time because this might be a good place to stop as well.
Yeah, let's let's stop it. Is it a good place to stop?
Okay, we can stop at the next couple of slides. Okay, so we actually
we got started kind of late, so.
Yes. Okay. So you know, we have actually discussed this. Our enzymes are like the factory workers converting. So I just have a little picture. I was going to play a video and there is a link where it says factory humor, but I don't even know if we need to do that. It's basically the I Love Lucy video where they're trying to, like, her and her friend are trying to wrap chocolates. And
oh my God. Are you kidding me? That's like one of my favorite episodes.
So that's the link to it. But it's just really funny because they're going to get in trouble if they don't have every chocolate wrapped. So they start stuffing them in their hat and in their mouth. And I'm like, okay, those are lab markers, right? So when your enzymes can't convert, they're trying to stuff everything everywhere else in your body. That can be kind of a deposition disease of some kind. It could be lab markers that are out of balance because the enzymes can only do what they can do with the time they have to do it, with the tools they have.
Well, great point. No, that's exactly right. And
you
now
can go back and watch that later.
Yeah. No, I know that one by heart. I grew up on that one, and I laugh about that. Between that one and the Vita Vegemin one, that was pretty funny. So, again, I'm showing my age here. Oh,
And then the next slide, this is really important for people to realize, because I get a lot of people coming to me and they're like, oh, my labs are good. I have nothing wrong. My doctor said I'm fine. Well, let's look at how the labs are made. So in the United States, labs are going to be, the lab ranges are going to be regional. And that means like California is different than Texas or Minnesota or New York, right? And so when it is regional like that, it means that it's subject to their averages of the population. So say you have in Florida, it's summertime and you have a major influx of, what is it called? The winter birds or something like that?
the snowbirds.
Snowbirds. Okay. And so then now they're all getting their medical care over the summer. Well, I bet that totally affects Florida's lab ranges, right? And when you're on medications that are affecting your blood too, or you have all these health issues, and like, for example, the range for cholesterol is the perfect example, because over time, the statin range has slid down and down and down. And we talked earlier about cholesterol. It's the building block for our hormones and our tissues and our fat soluble everything. So when we look at how the lab range has slid down, right now, if I look at the lab range for cortisol, it says less than 199. Oof. So I have literally had a patient, specifically I'm thinking of, and he was on statins. He doesn't need them. Like, his symptoms did not correlate with statins at all. I'm sorry, he doesn't even have high cholesterol. His cholesterol was 84 total, and he had major body aches completely. He just like couldn't move. And I'm like, well, you're like, you don't have anything to make your sex hormones. He had no testosterone. His skin had poor integrity. Like, he was bruising everywhere all over because his membranes were not intact. His membranes in his cells were probably leaky too. So toxins are just like effusing through the tissues. He had brain fog. His nervous system wasn't working good. And there are studies that show if your cortisol is below like 160 to 140 or 140 to 160-ish, you're starting to move into cancer, autoimmune, and hemorrhagic stroke category, right? So when your cortisol is high, you have certain cardiovascular risks. Well, you also have them when it's really low, plus some other nasty risks. So a balance is important. Okay, so I digress a little bit because I went on a tangent, but here we can kind of see the bell curve, how they calculate lab ranges. So they're taking all these lab samples from a given population, plotting them on a graph, drawing a line that kind of traces the average of that, cutting off the upper 25th percentile, the lowest 25th percentile, and calling everyone in the middle normal. It's not based on health. And this isn't just cortisol. This is every single marker in the lab, right?
Wow. I did not know that. I did not know that's how they establish those values.
So I will have patients coming in and a white blood cell count is 10, right? So they're, I think 10.4 around here, it could be different in another state, is the part where like they're going to be, oh, you have an infection and you need to be on antibiotics. So if they're at 10, and anything over like 6.4-ish, your immune system is really activated. You really need to figure out what's going on. And it's going to be most likely an infection, but it could be other food sensitivities. But if it's been going on a long time, your white blood cell count is actually going to go down. So if it's going to go up, it's kind of something going on more immediately. And usually it is infection. But the other thing is, you hear about all these people who have strokes, right? They're having clotting strokes, and it's really, really scary. And people think, oh, I have an issue with my platelets or my fibrinogen, or I'm clotting. But they're not really thinking about what's causing the clotting. So doctors are chasing the clots, putting them on blood thinners or whatever. But they actually need to look further because they're at 10, right? So in Western medicine or traditional allopathic care, that's okay. You don't have an infection yet. But the clot actually probably is happening from infection. So you actually need to treat the infection, right? And so if they're, yeah, basically, and then need to look at platelets, like on a CBC with differential as well. And if you see their platelets drifting up like above 300 or so is kind of where I'm going, like, okay, your platelets are activated, your white blood cell count is going up, your neutrophils are above 60% too. Like they can be as high as 80% in a person. And that's very likely an infection. They need antibiotics. It's kind of a health risk that they're going to have a clotting stroke or an embolism or something like that.
That's a big wow. Thank you, Dr. Boyle. Yeah, I think we'll stop there now. It's 3:30. I know we went over a little. Sorry, everyone. A little bit of a late start, but some great information. And clearly, we're getting close to the slide deck, but she just has some awesome information. So, and I want to share this with you. So we'll definitely continue on this for the next saga of Poly Talks. We'll save these questions for next time so that we can address those at the next presentation. But what a great dose of information. Thank you for the education.
Awesome.
Thanks for the sound, awesome analogies. Thank you for sharing your experience, your knowledge, and the desire to help other people. Really, really, really fortunate to have you. So thank you everybody for participating. I look forward to it again. I think we'll be doing part 3 or part 4, which is fine by me. This is.
I get one more would be probably good.
One more.
I think we're getting into the next phase. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? It's okay. It's great information, and we're here to share that information. Thank you all for making the time, and we look forward to having you back on Fox in November. So hard to believe we're already in October, and we look forward to having a great start to the fall season. It finally cooled down around here. Did it cool down around you as well?
It feels really good. Yeah.
It feels good. Yes, it does. So, well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.